a dogma lesson, just not bothering to plan? That's a question for TEFLologists. When I read this book, is it better to skim or scan? That's a question for TEFLologists. Can you be a good teacher if you have a CELTA? Or should you invest in an MA or a Delta? From politics to methodology, we'll discuss them all on TEFLology.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to TEFLology, a podcast about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters. Presented by three self-certified TEFLologists.
A term we made up.
TEFL Pioneers. Today's TEFL pioneer is Maximilian Berlitz, or to give him his full name, Maximilian Delphinius Berlitz, which is a great name, isn't it? It's a fantastic name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not enough Delphiniuses.
No, there's probably more in Germany, which is where he was born in 1872. And most of the information that I'll be giving in this podcast comes from a book called Berlitz, 120 Years of Excellence, which I was just about to hold up to the microphone for the listeners at home to...
120 years of excellence.
Looks like a Christmas annual.
It's gigantic, this book.
Get that in your stocking.
Yeah. 120 years of excellence doesn't sound like it's a fair and balanced view of...
No, well, it is published by the Berlitz Corporation, so I think...
so it's a big advertisement.
Yeah. What I've done is I've taken what they've written about him and then removed all the adjectives. So yeah, as I said, he was born in 1852 in Germany. In 1872, he emigrated to America. As a young man, he travelled extensively. He learned more than a dozen languages, so he was very well spoken.
He was able to speak well
yes.
to different people.
When he arrived in America, he started.
So just to interrupt, do we know which languages?
Mainly Romance languages,
right.
according to this book.
Yes, and I wonder. I'm always skeptical when I hear those numbers. So and so spoke this many languages, because usually they speak a bit of them.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, you know.
But maybe.
According to this book.
According to this book, which I don't know why they lie. But when he arrived in America, he became a clock repairman and a part-time language teacher of Greek and Latin. So he used to teach these languages. So maybe he did have some level of proficiency, at least in some of them. And after that, he started working at a business college where he co-wrote his first book with the principal of the business college. Again, he was a language teacher there. So most people know Berlitz because of the Berlitz schools. Have either of you ever worked for the Berlitz schools?
No, I think I applied once, or maybe didn't even get that far. I just... no.
Saw an advert.
I remember early in my teaching career being warned off working at Berlitz.
Yes, that's probably why I stopped, actually. Yeah, I heard mixed reviews.
And I knew people who worked there, but people who just sat at a computer. Like somehow, I don't know exactly what they were doing, but they were teaching via computer and sitting at a computer. It didn't sound like very satisfying.
Yeah, it's kind of, in the modern world, it's got a bit of a reputation, which is why I think this 120 years of excellence, we can probably shave off 50 of those.
As a young teacher, I was told that to work at Berlitz, you had to be very experienced, very qualified, and I kind of had that assumption. Maybe I don't have that assumption anymore, but at the time, I certainly remember somebody saying, "How many years have you been teaching?" "Oh, you wouldn't be able to work." They're professional teachers.
But I heard that about the British Council, and I've worked for the British Council now, so
I think that's part of the image they want to create. I think when I was starting teaching, which was around when that book came out, I think you had to wear a suit and tie to go and work at Berlitz,
right?
Even though you were just
that was the only qualification, though.
Yeah, exactly. Because they assume you've
very business-like. That's my impression.
Yeah. Well, maybe what Berlitz is most known for, apart from the schools, is the Phillips Method. The Berlitz Method, which is the way that they teach in Berlitz schools. And there's an interesting story behind how the Berlitz Method came about. It's possible that this has become a bit of an urban legend, but at the college that Berlitz was teaching at, they decided to hire a French teacher, and they got an application from a guy called Nicolas Joly. Joly, how do you pronounce that?
Joly.
Okay.
Joly?
I don't know.
Joly, he came in for
any relation to Dom?
Don't know. But he came in for an interview, and at the time Berlitz was quite sick from overwork. He was overstressed, and he basically had no choice. He had to bring in Joly even though he realised at the time that Joly couldn't speak any English. And he was very panicked, but he didn't really have an option. There was no one else to do the teaching, and he couldn't do it himself because he was sick. So instead of sending Joly away, he told him to point at objects in the classroom, to name them and describe them, and try to act out verbs as best he could. And he went away, and when he came back, he was expecting to find the classroom to be in disarray and the students complaining, but instead he found the students actually communicating quite naturally in French with their instructor and with each other in question and answer kind of ways, formats. And so he then developed into the Berlitz method, which is a variation of the natural approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to explain what the natural approach is?
Not really, no.
Do you want to?
No, not really.
Rubbish, you
But we know what it is, Rob.
Yeah, but the listeners at home might not know. I don't know why they're listening to this if they don't know, but they might not. So basically, these are ways of learning languages as living languages, mainly through communication and real usage, as opposed to through grammar translation and that kind of thing. So the Berlitz method is a variation on that, using a particular set of principles, including a focus on the grading of grammar and syntax, and the staged introduction of grammar and syntax, so that students can understand both the meaning and the form of what's being said to them. So it was a more systematized version of the natural or the direct approach to language learning. Yeah.
Things have kind of moved beyond that sort of approach now, I guess, where people are kind of detaching meaning and form at the same time, and
Well, that was the case before
communicative language teaching. Yeah, I guess this came before CLT and things. So
Yeah, but it's a communicative approach.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, but it's not the.
No, it
So
predates the communicative approach.
Yeah.
Yes, but it predates the communicative approach as a term.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But it has many commonalities.
Yeah.
So in 1878, Berlitz decided to open his own language school based on these principles, based on the Berlitz method. And it was actually very interesting in the way that he promoted it. I think that maybe one of the reasons that he was more successful than his contemporaries was that he was an excellent self-promoter. So, for example, he went to Europe and he taught English to Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was the Emperor of Germany and the King of Prussia. And he also taught to some other people. He was given honours in Spain, Morocco and France. So he became very well known. And maybe the biggest publicity success was in 1904, where he participated in the World's Fair. So this was just after, I can't remember which war, but an American war where the Philippines became an American protectorate. Do you know what war that would be?
Nope.
No, okay. I should have written that down in my notes. But because the Philippines had become a US protectorate, one exhibit at the fair was a 47-acre Philippine village, where people would come and sort of stare at Filipinos.
Right.
And Berlitz was hired to teach English to these Filipinos. And this became like a big news story.
Yeah.
Everyone was sort of fascinated in his method of teaching and also the context in which he was doing it.
Yeah.
And the course was so successful that the small group of Filipinos that he taught at the World's Fair were hired as English instructors and recruited as English instructors when they went back to the Philippines, kind of kick-starting the English language industry in the Philippines, which I think you're going to talk about in the next section now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder what's the... So he claimed to have taught English to Kaiser Wilhelm II and various other leaders.
Yeah.
I always wonder, there must be people now who go around teaching heads of states. Heads of state.
Yep.
Like, who gets those jobs? How do you get into that?
I think mainly nepotism would be my guess.
Yeah,
well, I don't think it's through, like companies like Berlitz, for example.
It's through dispatch companies.
Yeah, well, I don't know, actually, it's interesting. But I think, in terms of Berlitz being a pioneer, he was probably one of the first people that actually branded a school or a method of teaching, kind of gave English teaching a logo.
Yeah. I think perhaps he was the first to come up with a very recognisable brand, but he wasn't the first to brand or to come up with his own method. There were a few different people before that.
But like the world over, he kind of... he was a good salesman, and he sort of sold English as an object, I guess, a
Well,
product.
creating a global language chain, I think, was definitely something that he did that no one else did. So he started schools in Europe, South America, the Middle East, basically everywhere. And he started what I guess today we would call TEFL, travel teaching, because he sent people around the world to these schools for short-term contracts, and they worked in these schools for a short time, then went back to their own country. So it's kind of like the backpacker teachers that we get now. He basically started that with his school, and there were actually some very famous people who taught at Berlitz schools back in the early 1900s. Do you know?
Yes, such as?
Such as? Well, one was Wilfred Owen, the World War One poet.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Before he went to war?
Before he went to war, yeah, he taught in Bordeaux.
Okay.
Yeah, and he didn't write any poems about his experience of being a language teacher that I know of.
That would have made for better.
But they would have been really poignant if he had.
Yes.
But he would have done had he.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another very famous one of the early Berlitz teachers was James Joyce.
Yes, actually I did know about
Again.
Joyce.
Well, why didn't you say so?
Because I forgot.
Again,
in Paris.
You didn't write about.
No, in Croatia.
Croatia.
Modern day Croatia. At the time, it was on the border.
Back then it was part of Paris.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
he chose not to write about.
Well, he might have done. What did James Joyce
I don't
write?
know.
Ulysses.
That was about teaching.
Portrait of the Artist and Young Man.
Dubliners.
The Dubliners, yeah.
Yeah.
One of those stories.
About a pub that he drank at.
Yeah, where he and
No,
teaching
I
as
think-
well.
I don't know. Yeah.
That's like that joke. An English teacher goes into a bar and never leaves. So Berlitz died in 1921, just to bring the tone down a bit. And since his death,
We all died, Rob.
Yes, yes. But since then, the company's gone through a few different hands. It first went through members of his family, and then it was bought out by other companies. And I'm not sure exactly what its position is now. It's obviously still in a lot of different countries. Maybe it's not quite such a nice place to work, or considered quite so prestigious as it was back in the day. I hope I never have to apply there, based on if they've heard me say this. But at least we can say that Berlitz himself and the company that he started was very innovative, and I think it played a big role in the way that modern TEFL is now.
Yeah, that's a good point. What I just thought about is that it's unusual that nothing has replaced Berlitz. I mean, Berlitz still exists, but its reputation is not.
What was a worldwide?
As a worldwide language, I mean, it seems there's a opening in the market for a worldwide language learning chain.
Well, I mean, there are lots of them, really. There's like the International House, English First, the
Yeah,
British
but
Council.
none. I mean, Berlitz.
It's a charity, though, isn't it? The British Council?
Layperson, people who know nothing about language teaching have probably heard of Berlitz.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
maybe Berlitz, because all the others
Yeah.
are just language schools, Berlitz is like a big chain of like textbooks and like self-study
travel
books and
books.
TV
Do they
books and
make
travel
travel
books.
Maybe it's travel
Yeah.
books, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think people know them from their textbooks or anything. They just know the name as
Mm.
language schools.
Berlitz,
But
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think things like English First or International House, potentially, if they had better marketers, I don't know, they could be.
Yeah. Well, maybe the reason that it was so big at the time and now there isn't an equivalent is because at the time it wasn't competing against anything, and now there are many different competing companies. So
yeah.
it's very difficult for one of them to rise above to complete global dominance. Yeah, who knows? But yeah, anyway, that's our TEFL pioneer for this week, Maximilian Dolphinius Berlitz. TEFL News.
Okay, so for this week's news topic, I'd like to talk about a trend in English language learning. It's not much of a. When we say news, we often talk about up-to-date kind of events, but this is kind of that's what news means, isn't it? But, this is something that's been kind of growing over the past 10 years, I guess. And it's the trend of English language learners not going to perceived native-speaking countries such as England or America, kind of Kashrus, inner circle countries.
Yeah.
You know, the native-speaking countries for English courses and English learning, and instead they're going to countries such as the Philippines for this experience, which Rob touched on in his bit. Yeah.
Why the Philippines?
There's one reason: it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Essentially, that is the reason. A lot of students from, for example, Iran, Libya, Brazil, Russia, South Korea, are deciding that it's too expensive to go to England, America to take these courses, maybe for visa reasons as well, perhaps. And they'd suddenly go to the Philippines instead as a very attractive alternative.
Is it just the Philippines, or are there other countries with similar populations of English speakers that are attracting the business?
I mean, I guess possibly Singapore.
Okay.
Maybe.
I think that would be quite expensive, though.
Yeah, that was
Malaysia.
Malaysia perhaps. Yeah, but the Philippines is becoming very well known for its kind of high quality of English teaching as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the teachers that do teach just in regular conversation schools are actually professors. You know, they've gone to university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There's better money for them in English language teaching? Or?
well, I mean, there seems to be more turnover, I guess. There's a lot of students coming, more and more, you know, increasing numbers every year. And so there's a lot of work there. Yeah, and apparently what they equate it to is, someone's written here, the Filipinos speak with a clear American accent, particularly because the Philippines was a US colony for 5 decades.
Yeah.
So they sort of equate their American-sounding voices to that being, well, this is almost native-like, and this kind of fits the bill,
Right.
as it were.
Yeah. So do you think that, because I was going to ask, do you think this reflects a growing awareness among students of the diversity of English speaking countries and populations?
Yeah.
But if they're drawn to it because
Well, that's the weird thing.
It seems more like
they seem first drawn to it because of how cheap it is. Second, well, it's kind of an approximation of what an American person sounds like. You sound almost American, so you'll do kind of thing. So yeah, it doesn't seem like they're going there to learn Filipino English, which is probably a growing variety of English.
Yeah.
They're probably going there to learn maybe standard American English through a Filipino teacher.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's what they're doing. So I think it's money first, and then.
And is it all just people physically going there?
Yeah, a large number of people are going there, and just to give some prices, school fees are $500 for a 60-hour class, so £313 sterling pounds.
We're just getting the product placement in there.
I'm not saying which school because I don't know, but that's very cheap. You know, that's very cost effective.
And who's going there exactly?
Like I said before, Brazilian students, Russian students. South Korean students,
Japanese students,
and perhaps Japanese students
yeah,
too.
I've spoken to a couple of people who've been.
And there's kind of some kind of offshoots to this trend. What some schools in South Korea are now starting to do is they're starting to hire virtual English teachers. Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard about it in Japan as well.
So what they've started doing is they've actually started getting kind of robot-like machines, I guess, perhaps, or screens, certainly screens into the classroom. And they have the teacher from the Philippines giving the lesson in real time, often real time.
All right.
In the class, so there'd be like maybe perhaps a robot looking. Often they use a penguin, apparently, like a penguin-shaped thing for kids.
Right.
And you don't see the penguin. You don't see the teacher's face. And that's
Penguins traditionally English speaking.
yeah. You know,
Sounds
we've all heard of penguins from the Philippines, after all. And they're very well known English-speaking penguins.
But they've got American accents, so
they've got American accents,
like normal penguins.
And this is an important point: is that you don't actually see the teacher's face; you just hear their accent.
That's interesting.
And for the students, they have a penguin in the room speaking to them. And it's very engaging for the students.
You're saying they're so racist they would rather learn English from a penguin than a Filipino.
Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying this is what I've read. This is what I've heard.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing is the schools in South Korea are paying the teachers at the local Filipino rate. Sorry, the Philippine rate. So they're not actually paying them what they would be getting if they were in South Korea. So that's kind of a problem with this system at the moment. But it is more cost effective, obviously.
Yeah.
Another offshoot is that there's also now a trend for Filipino teachers to move out of the Philippines and teach in countries such as Japan and South Korea. And this has been met with a lot of tension in South Korea, especially, as I'll just quote here: under Korean law, only professionals from native English-speaking countries, such as the United States, can teach the language in Korean schools. Okay, that's a direct quote from.
But is that
newspaper.
a law, a regulation?
Apparently it is, yeah.
Principle?
Apparently it is. So they don't actually want them in the country, but they can teach from afar.
I
And
see.
sound native. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That kind of sounds like a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what would happen if they are moving outside of the Philippines. Are they going to be paid at the same level as so-called native English speakers, or not? Yeah.
Good point.
But you made the point that do you think this is raising awareness of world varieties of English? I'd like to think it is, but I'm not sure they are the reasons behind this trend.
It's more of a price thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But that could be a driving factor, a legitimate driving factor, and one day, countries, no longer needing native English speakers to go around the world and teach everybody English.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of patronizing. Oh, now they can teach themselves, but I think that's maybe not a bad aim.
Does this make you fear the incoming tide of Filipino teachers undercutting
not
us,
particularly.
taking our jobs, coming over here?
I'm scared of penguins, to be honest.
Sounds like those penguins coming over here. Yeah.
I've heard of also you can basically pay for very, very cheap like conversation practice doing Skype with Filipinos or Filipinos.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think broadly speaking, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it gives non-native speakers, although I'm sure that many of them are native speakers, but I'll do air quotes, non-native speakers. The air quotes are around native speakers.
Yeah, it was in your tone.
Yeah. It gives them more of an opportunity professionally. I think, as you said, it's probably going to help raise awareness of different varieties, different forms, and different speakers of the language, which is what most people in the academic side of TESOL are arguing in favour of anyway. So yeah, I kind of think it's a good thing.
It's interesting. When I was working in London, hiring teachers, we had a good percentage. I'd say maybe somewhere between 5 and 10% of CVs we received were from Polish. Polish people. Yeah. Not Polish penguins. Poles.
Yeah.
Who I think had been teaching English in Poland, and I'm sure were probably, no, I'm not going to say it, but I'm sure very, very accomplished English language teachers. And just judging on the advanced Polish students that we had at the school, I'm sure were.
I mean, for me, the Philippines kind of seems like a satellite place to learn English, in the sense that it's kind of removed from the norms. It's detached. It's cheaper. It's kind of a satellite English learning context, I guess.
Or maybe an emergent English learning context.
Possibly,
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the TEFL news for today.
TEFL cultures.
Okay, today's TEFL culture is we're going to talk about a language teaching method. I'm going to tease it a little bit first. So I'm going to talk first list the principles of this method. Number 1, teachers should concentrate on how students learn, not on how to teach. Number 2, imitation and drill are not the primary means by which students learn. Number 3, learning consists of trial and error, deliberate experimentation, suspending judgment, and revising conclusions. Number 4, in learning, learners draw on everything that they already know, especially their native language. And number 5, the teacher never opens their mouth.
Okay.
So what do you think this, any ideas what this method might be?
I'm not sure. Can you give me another hint?
Sure.
Oh, that's the hint, is it?
Yes, that's the hint.
Okay.
Actually, no, the fifth one is not the teacher never opens their mouth. The fifth one is the teacher must not interfere with the learning process.
Right.
Which is maybe the most... I mean, based on those first 4, do those all sound common sensical to you?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, they do. I mean, but the fifth one kind of seems to buck that trend. It's kind of a bit odd.
Okay.
Is this the? Can I guess?
Yes, of course.
Is this the silent way or silent approach?
The silent. It's usually known as the silent way.
Yeah.
The silent approach is how assassins move towards their victims.
It's very much like what teachers are, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, the silent way. Yes.
The silent way. Yeah. So maybe famously created by Caleb Gattegno,
Yeah.
who was an educator in general.
Right.
He, I think, mostly interested, well, originally focused on teaching mathematics and also teaching first languages, or not teaching first languages, but helping children with their first language education. And then he kind of opened up his scope to include second language teaching.
Yeah.
So obviously, famously, it's known for the use of silence by the teacher, and obviously, which gives us its name. But maybe it probably has a lot more in common with maybe even modern or contemporary language teaching methods, communicative language teaching. Then it's different.
I mean, I'm not very familiar with the silent way, but what I imagine it to be is the teacher in the room maybe has a lot of posters around the room and kind of maybe gets the students doing a task. And if there's some kind of communication difficulty, we'll kind of just gesture towards certain things that they should be saying or should be doing without really telling them what to do. Just kind of, and then their thought comes into play. Oh, I should be saying that. I should be doing that. And that's kind of what I imagine the silent way to be. So.
Yeah, so the charts, the wall charts are a big part of it.
Charts,
they're used for different purposes. So pronunciation. Going back to Henry Sweet, pronunciation is seen as a fundamental starting point for students learning a foreign language, and they start with figuring out all the sounds which are similar to their L1, and then moving on to the sounds which are different. And there's basically the charts connect different colors to different sounds, and this helps later for learning pronunciation of words. Yeah.
How does it help? In what way?
So in especially in terms of the spelling of words. Orange, for example, orange is a phoneme. Right. So then any PH or F.
I thought you were going to say orange. Orange is just orange.
That would be the easiest way.
So what the teacher would do is form some kind of pattern or some kind of rubric, I guess. And then so the students would learn how to identify what the teacher's pointing to or gesturing to.
Yeah. So obviously the teacher does have to do some work in terms of explain to the students what these word charts mean and how the colors relate to different sounds, etc. Right. And the teacher is not 100% silent.
Yeah.
Maybe eventually is, but generally the rule is the teacher can model sounds or words once. Yeah. And then it's up to the students to kind of pick it up from there. So,
What if one of the students wasn't really listening?
Well, then they hear it from another student.
Okay, all right. It spreads.
I mean,
exactly.
Do you think you use elements of the silent way in how you teach in general? I mean, I certainly do. When the students are practicing a new target language of the lesson or a function, for example, I often prompt to the board just by pointing and gesturing the students. I guess that's one element of silent way. I wouldn't say I'm a silent way teacher.
But, silent waiter.
Silent waiter.
Basically, this idea of silence comes down to providing students the minimal amount of support they need to arrive at what you want them to arrive at. So things like mouthing words or gesturing with your hands. What they call the purposes of silence in the silent way are focusing students' attention. So it's the students know it's about their output. Eliciting student responses. So rather than the teacher jumping in and providing the response, which I think maybe that's a big influence that it's had. I think earlier, and maybe sometimes we still experience as language learners, the teacher kind of giving you the answer before you've had time to. And so the silent way obviously is one way to discourage that.
So is this something that you've tried? Have you been a silent way teacher?
I worked in a school with using a method, I would say maybe heavily influenced by the silent way. Right. So we had wall charts. Yeah. I had a laser pointer to direct students' attention to the wall chart.
Do you think the Berlitz method has some aspects of the silent way? If they're talking about looking at things around the room, the teacher's not really doing too much.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the silent way, definitely has similarities with a natural approach or a direct approach.
Right, yeah.
It's all about students using the language. It's very much promoting student autonomy is a key
definitely.
a key feature of it. I guess one way that the approach I was using in the school differed is that the silent way, it uses a structural syllabus.
Right.
So it is kind of fairly carefully mapped out in terms of what structures the students are going to use lesson to lesson.
Right, okay.
So
it's a lot easier to make things for that. And
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So the vocabulary that's introduced, but maybe similar to Berlitz, that the vocabulary is introduced, bit by bit in terms of building up in that way. So in those terms, I think silent way doesn't carry over too much to modern language teaching. Well, except in those, grammar nuggets we were talking about.
Yeah.
Do you think the principles that Gattegno was working from, do you think that those are borne out by any evidence? Do you think there's any reason to think that the principles he was working from are well-founded principles?
Or is there any contrast between this method and another method? Is there any kind of quantifiable data to say this is a stronger approach than?
Well, he wrote he introduced the silent way in a book called Teaching Foreign Languages in Schools in 1963.
Oh, okay.
And I think at that time, I think it was relatively modern or progressive approach to put the focus. So one of his famous quotes is he believes in the subordination of teaching to learning.
Right.
So basically shifting the focus from what the teacher does to what the students do.
Yeah.
And so not even student-centered learning, language-centered learning.
Right.
Or so putting the emphasis on what's happening between the students rather than what the teacher's doing or individual students.
I'd still argue that the teacher's doing a lot in doing nothing technically. They're putting a lot of principles behind not joining in more, not being more dominant in the class. I'd argue that it's more the teacher.
So Gattegno said the teacher works with the student works on the language. Yeah. So
Right,
the teacher is doing a lot.
The
teacher has to do a lot of work, but I think the silence from the teacher allows the students to focus on their relationship with the language rather than responding to things from the teacher.
Yeah.
Have you ever learned a language through a silent way approach?
No, I think I'd like to.
Has anyone ever learned a language?
People have.
Yeah.
People have, and Gattegno writes about people doing it, and Stevik does as well.
I remember when I did my cert TESOL. How many years ago? Well, I remember when I did my cert TESOL and I remember my teacher. She was a big fan of the silent way.
Okay.
And she introduced a lot of activities she introduced to us. She was very silent and she used a lot of hand gestures, and I kind of have taken that on myself as well.
That's interesting because on my CELTA they basically told us the silent way was complete nonsense, and
that's
I've absorbed that.
I had this very sort of a lady that been teaching for like 30, 40 years, and a lot of when she gave us handouts, she'd point to her nose, point to her ears, and make it very clear that the students aren't going to understand you saying, read this, write this, and just point to...
Do you think you could conduct a lesson in your current teaching context silently?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we all teach in the same context. So.
Definitely when the focus of the lesson is on student-to-student interaction.
Yeah, I think maybe doing things like error correction would be quite difficult in the silent way.
It's surprising. It depends what kind of error correction you want to do. But using your hands is one thing which I still do.
Just slap them
on the head if they get it wrong. If students say, for example, if you want a student to say, what do you think, or what does everyone think, and they come out with, do you think?
Yeah.
So what you do is you use your hand and you say, do you think? And then you say, something missing here.
Actually, I do that. Yeah. But I didn't know that was silent way. I just made that up.
Well, there you go.
There you go. In a secret silent way. Yeah.
So I guess like the silent way finds itself into all aspects of teaching, but I mean, as a method in itself, as a whole approach, I'm not sure if it could be a whole.
I guess
approach.
It's like all these other approaches where we've taken bits of them and incorporated into them, because now we're in the post-methods era when very few people are following an actual method. but
Yeah.
we're taking bits from all of these different methods that have been put forward and taking what works and leaving what doesn't, and trying to synthesize that into something we can actually use, personally in the classroom.
Yeah, I think so. So in conclusion,
It's apparently good.
No silence. That's our conclusion. Okay, thank you very much for listening to our podcast today. We hope you enjoyed our offerings. Please tune in again for more TEFL news, topics, cultures, and whatnot. Okay, so it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
And if you want to contact us, please email us at teflology@gmail.com. See you later.